This is Energy, and it is Thursday, April 2nd. And we are starting this morning, Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, getting an update from them. Welcome. So glad to have you.
We're delighted to be here. So for the record, Gus Seawood, Executive Director of the board.
And I'm Trey Martin, for the record, Director of Conservation and Rural Community Development. We're nice to see you.
And also with us is our Policy Director, Colin Major. So we'll do the testimony. The two of us are going to do the testimony today, but welcome the questions. Our goal is to give you an update on our work, to talk about our budget for the coming year, to hear your thoughts about how the program might be able to be improved, or questions that you have. So those are our goals. We'll touch briefly on Act 59, but if you want to dive deeply, we should do that at another time, or we spent close to an hour recording on that in the other body. But we'll touch at least briefly. I'm going to begin the presentation. You guys, like us, stand at the crossroads of land use. Where should we build? Where should we develop? Where should we protect open space, natural areas, natural communities, historic sites? And I'm going to begin the presentation in Putney because this development really speaks to our dual goals, which are called for in our statute to pay attention to both sides of the equation. And what you see here is the development of about 24 units of affordable housing taking place in a designated village center. An acre is being left permanently as a community. This is right across from the food co-op, and it's the place where the farmers market meets in the summer. So all of our goals are being achieved in one project. That's not a normal course of events, but in our strategic plan this year, we've decided we want to lean into that whenever we can. This is also a project that took 3 years to permit, despite the fact that the community said we want to have this as a village center, and that was a democratic decision that went to the Regional Planning Commission and got their blessing. And went then to a state board and got their blessing, and a single person basically helped it take 2 trips to the Supreme Court. Act 250 was not a problem here, except that the second appeal was that Act 250 had wrongly ruled they had no jurisdiction, and that took another 9 months for the Supreme Court to resolve. So as you think about the overlay of what I really think of as local control, the community deciding they wanted more intense development in their village, and the permitting process, that's an area that I think bears more attention, as does in general the appeals process. But we will open this project this spring.
Do you have a question?
So why wasn't Act 250 initially discussed?
It didn't have, it didn't have jurisdiction, and that's what the Natural Resources Board said, is we have no jurisdiction here, and the appellant challenged that they had no jurisdiction. That wasn't just like absolutely clear to everybody, and so that issue made a trip to the Supreme Court, and they of course said that Natural Resources Board was right. This slide speaks to our mission, and when you look at our statute, you'll actually find it doesn't just say build or preserve housing with conserved land. It says to do it for the purposes of economic vitality and quality of life. And this is another recent project, Buddy Moose in Morristown, which has a first. The natural resource features of this project include protections of the Lamoille River, about 150 acres of natural resource protection. The project was brought to us by the Stowe Land Trust. But there were also 8 vacation rental buildings that went with the property. And they could have said, let's just offload this to somebody who wants to continue to make money that way. And instead, because of our dual mission, they and we got in touch with Downstreet Housing, which is now taken on, merged with the Lamoille Housing Partnership. And we're actually, for the very first time that I can think of, converting rental housing, vacation homes for visitors into year-round homeownership opportunities. First 2 buyers include a mental health professional and a teacher at People's Academy. Both are single parents with 2 kids. So I think a great example of the value of the dual mission.
How did they get possession of that there were 8 vacation sites?
it was part of the whole conservation. In order to buy the land to be conserved, it came with the 8 homes on it, and so that's being subdivided off. And downstream is taking possession of
One
that.
parcel, which-
One parcel, rich, so they're taking possession of those 8 homes and the land around it and repurposing them as year-round permanent residences rather than vacation rentals. This is our budget for the year. The capital bill is not resolved in the other body, but this is the governor's recommend and the House has supported that. And we hope you'll communicate to your colleagues on the other side of the hall that you think this is a good idea. The capital bill funding is all for clean water related conservation and is recommended by the Clean Water Board. A few words about the pictures you see here, and again, a piece of our dual mission. We have sponsored for 30 years an AmeriCorps program. The AmeriCorps volunteers do environmental education. They work at facilities for the homeless. They work at homeownership centers. They're a leadership development program. One of the ways that that leadership got expressed is that a number of alumni decided there ought to be a statewide mentoring program for kids who were living in affordable housing all over the state. They created a program called the Dream Program. After doing that for 2 years, about 15 years ago, they said these kids need an outdoor summer camp experience. So we helped them buy some land up in Fletcher to establish that summer camp. Last summer, we helped them buy an island on that body of water. So kids who otherwise don't have access to those kinds of experiences might not have had access to the mentoring programs we're getting. We just opened an apartment building in West Rutland. The town manager spoke at the opening, and this is a site not across the road from the food market. There are a number of other distressed sites in that neighborhood. So when we think about our housing, we think about the catalytic impact, and she felt strongly that getting this site cleaned up because there was environmental contamination was going to lead to 3 or 4 other sites right in that neighborhood being able to be redeveloped in a way that would not have been possible with what was there before. It's also about a 10-minute walk to something called the West Rutland Marsh. And if you're into birds, people from all over the country go to the West Rutland Marsh to see birds. It is just and it's a property we conserved probably about 20 years ago for the community.
Yes.
So the recommend the had no money from the general fund for,
No, all from the transfer tax this year.
so,
But then last year, over the course of the pandemic, you have appropriated lots of both ARPA and general fund one-time funding. Last year was we got about $7.8 million in general fund beyond the transfer tax recommendation. This year, the governor has not made that recommendation, and we understand that that's a much more scarce opportunity.
okay, it's not, go back to normal.
We're back to normal.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm gonna turn this over to Trey in a minute, but I just wanted to run down for you some of the ways that conservation serves rural communities and one more urban community. Senator Beck, I was not able to join you when the Danville train station was reopened.
It's nice of that.
The building was being used as a recycling center for many years. It was not in the best condition. And it sits right on the Memorial Rail Trail and provides an entry point into Danville. And about 3 years ago, former Representative Kitty Toll called me up and said, we need to raise a lot of money for this. And it meets the conservation part of our mission that speaks to supporting historic sites. And we have a process of historic gathering places the whole community would use. So we helped them with a couple grants. I think they said we were the first dollars in, and then as costs went up, we were the last dollars in to get the building refurbished. And if you're cycling on that trail, it's either an entryway into Danville or a great place to stop and have a creamy on a hot day. And the community's quite excited about it. The most heartwarming project of the last year for me was when Vermont Adaptive came to us. They provide services and programs both in Waitsfield and at Killington for people who have mobility impairments, summer and winter. Their services for veterans are free, wherever they come from. And they needed a permanent home. And with the help of the Vermont Land Trust, they found a site in Rochester. This will bring economic activity to that little village. When they build out their campus, they'll have housing for 18 interns there. So they're going to be bringing people to Rochester, both for their services and as employees, in a way that's going to be really positive. And I think in terms of an outcome for people with mobility impairments, it's just a wonderful thing that they'll have a permanent influence. The Whetstone Brook in Brattleboro, former Representative and Senator David Dean called the Whetstone a dinky little brook. But when Irene hit, it roared and caused huge amounts of damage. This is a site that was 12 acres that was owned by Sir Sosimo Lumber. And what's happened here is it's been transferred with the aid of the Vermont Rivers Conservancy and us and A&R to the town of Brattleboro. A berm was removed, lots of fill taken out, and it's just going to create much more flood resilience there. There's another project like this in West Brattleboro, where about 50 units of housing have been removed. We rebuilt in another location over by the high school. We're going to this year restore 30 units that are out of the floodway. We're also, in a couple of weeks, going to have a big celebration at Tri Park where we move people again out of the floodway to higher ground. But this is part of, I think, our resilience work in a way that we're supporting and reducing flood risk in Brattleboro's downtown. Last thing here, just again, going to the rural economy, Lisa McCool is somebody who farmed on lease land in Powell for a decade. And then the Vermont Land Trust through their farmland access program. And with our support for purchase development rights, was able to get on permanent land in Shaftesbury. She's also somebody who's been enrolled in the Farm and Forest Viability Program, which Trey will talk about in a couple of minutes, but I think has been knocking it out of the park in the decade since she was able to get a permanent home for her operation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Trey to talk more about conservation. I'll come back and talk more about housing as we move through the presentation. And please keep going to questions.
Oh yeah, we're definitely, this works better if you don't have to try to remember questions. The last thing I don't, Senator Congress, I don't know if you know John Graff down at Burton, the history teacher there. He was the first person who introduced me to adaptive sports, and he was the adaptive ski coach that he did with GIST. And then he would take all the free tickets he got and he'd give it to all the other teachers for their kids. So it was like this amazing proliferation of people having access to the outsides, which when we did this project, I was, took me back a long time. Anyways, I am so excited to, I mean, if you can see here, just the breadth of things.
Oh.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. Said a lot of fun things in Vermont.
A lot of friends in common.
Yeah, and yeah, after I went to law school, I moved up here and I've been doing this kind of land protection and land use and land access work with Gus and others. And one of the most exciting things is the impacts we have in individual moments. But just before I talk about the floating classroom, just looking at the range of conservation programs we have, this is how we have the breadth of impact that we have and the way that we create collaboration in communities. It's by having so many different doors to think about community development through land protection and conservation. So whether it's protecting those natural communities and connected forests, protecting on the farms and the food systems that make them work in Vermont, protecting the viability of those enterprises on farms and in our forests, the production of products from the land into products that we all consume every day. We love our Vermont food, but we also consume like 3 pounds of wood per day per person. And so, supporting all those industries that bring those products to us from here in Vermont are just super important. Say more about water quality in a minute, but a few years ago, with respect to Newport classroom, but a few years ago when Act 76 passed, VHCD was asked to participate as a clean water service provider up in Newport. Mostly regional planning commissions did that work along the Champlain basin, but the planning commission there asked us if we could help out. VHCD stepped in, even though we're centered in Montpelier, we were able to work with the partners up there and develop a really effective program to bring state money to do extra phosphorus abatement work And then, and because we're so efficient, we do lots of other things with that money as well. So we're hitting our targets and then thinking about all these co-benefits. But just to go down the list, thinking about rural economic development is where we sort of start and end, but you all formalized that a few years ago by creating the READY program, which is up till now has worked with towns smaller than 5,000 on an inordinately large impact and bringing out external funding into their projects. But now as we talked about that, what can we do for all rural communities? And then finally, historic preservation, which is as Gus said, where we see the intersection of people, built infrastructure, and then often getting outside or getting connected to nature. But I've been teasing it for long enough. The floating classroom project was one that we did not with the QUISP dollars, which are pollution abatement, but because we realized in that community that we couldn't do the Act 76 work without building the capacity of partners. We went to the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission through a congressionally directed spending earmark, and we were able to use that earmark to provide mostly operating funds to the watershed groups and people up there, including the folks at the Metro Maine Science Center, who have now got the next generation of scientists out on the lake, learning how to take water quality samples, use Secchi discs, measure the turbidity. It's all the things that we want them to grow up and learn to do. So amazing impacts there in the Northeast. Staying with how water gathers us, as we think about our natural area projects, we often think about public recreation through those natural area protections. This is the former Scouts camp up in Benson and Orwell that when the Scouts decided they were going to sell, they asked the state FBR if they wanted to take it on as a state park or as another camp for fish and wildlife, something like that. The state wasn't able to take the project. There was so much deferred maintenance around the dam, and then the built infrastructure that it didn't work for the state to take it on, and that turned out to be the best thing ever because Outright Vermont and Vermont Land Trust and the communities came together and formed a partnership to keep this land open. The forest is still open for hunting and walking. There's trail through there. The waterfront access is still open for the community, but there's also now a camp for LGBTQ youth. One of only, a few dozen in the whole country where kids can go from vulnerable communities and be safe in a summer camp experience. So, combining that with this like continued public access with, protection of great water and forest resources is like, these are like us on our best day. And it's really fun to be able to do this work. So parkland conservation is as big or bigger a part of the financial, work that we do every year is taking state dollars and using them to draw down natural resource conservation service dollars from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We're able to bring in money in a 1-to-1 ratio with this program to protect our best farms and farm acres across Vermont. And we've done hundreds of farms with VLT and other partners over the years, protecting those communities, protecting that way of life, that impact on our local economy. You can see the way that just in fiscal year 25, we were able to leverage almost $5 million federal dollars to bring them into Vermont. And that, those funds go to, unlike other conservation funds, they end up going through our partners to families, to private owners of land to help them with their enterprise and with the viability of what they do. Sometimes when it's going from one generation to the next in a family, or if it's going from, one operator with no kids to a new operator. And this is what happened down in West Pollock. This berry farm was operated by somebody who was ceasing operation, had no heirs. It was up for sale. One of the proposals coming in was to do a set of storage units, which I don't know about you, after my dad passed, storage unit, I really needed some storage units. So it's not unimportant, but this is an amazing farm out of the Pollock community where there's over 25 conserved farms along the Meadowy River. 3/4 of them have worked with VHCV, thousands of acres protected over the last 30 years. So getting this protected was a goal. And then a law enforcement officer stepped forward who wanted to, in his spare time, take this on and do a respite farm or a sanctuary. And so we were able to help him get on to beat the bid from the storage unit people. And now he has, I just have to look at this because it's 99 acres, 30 acres of prime ag soil, and on that growing 500 to 600 pounds of berries every summer, which is then helping to subsidize the animal sanctuary. So what an amazingly fun story that is. And one of the reasons why we're doing Act 59 is that there's a lot of development pressure in Vermont, and as we were talking about the long-term planning for conservation in Vermont last summer, we asked American Farmland Trust to help us tell the story about what's happening around New England, and especially in Vermont with the conversion of farmland, which is, often the flat, cleared, well-drained lands that are easy to put houses on. And easy to develop, and sometimes that's what makes sense for the community. Sometimes the agricultural resource is so strong, we fight to protect it. But what we worry about is the conversion towards low density residential housing, where we're not meeting our housing goal needs. We're building really expensive homes. We're doing them on 10 acres apiece and taking agriculture and productivity out of communities.
Thank you. I have two general questions that have just been brewing in my head over this session.
Go ahead,
So
please.
I don't know, they are indirectly related, but one is when we were talking about Act 181 and the mapping and everything. I talked to a lot of my towns, and in several of them, more than I would have expected, in the area that is potentially 1B, the sort of area where they're gonna wanna build housing, there's protected conserved land, and so it's sort of off limits. And so a couple of the towns I talked to were asking me like, is there anything we can do? Is there like a way to swap land or do? And these are in the downtown areas of small towns that should, where they would like to build housing. So that's one question. I just want to pick your brain about that. Maybe that's a longer conversation.
It's a bit of a longer conversation.
Yeah.
But generally, conservation in perpetuity means forever.
Yeah, and that's what I was.
Yeah,
I don't know.
but sometimes there's
I don't know
flexibility
the
in it.
details of the land, so to be fair, I don't know the details of the
It
land.
really
This
depends.
has come up a couple times in my towns, and go
What
ahead, yes.
what I can tell you, and have a longer conversation at a different point, is that whenever we are asked to conserve a farm, we look at the local plan and the town plan, and we ask the community whether or not conservation is consistent with it or not. So I can think of at least one instance in one of your communities, I can't remember which one now, where they said, and I remember the name was the Connor Farm, so you may know where it is. But might have been the Connor Farm 20 years ago. It's a different name today. Where the community said, we like the idea of conserving this farm. Would you please leave this 10 acres out because it's adjacent to the village
Yeah,
and that's a place for future growth? And we said, well, when that's happened, it happened up to Newport town, and on one occasion, we've been respectful of the community's wishes. So that's how we try to operate. I think the 1D mapping is probably gonna provoke some new questions and new challenges. And then undoing conservation easement is a very difficult thing, but.
Sometimes there's flexibility built into the
There are
easement.
some easements.
yeah, and I don't know the details of but I can talk to you more. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the other option is condemnation,
Mhm.
which a community has the right to if there's a significant public need.
Yeah,
And I know we hate the idea of condemnation in Vermont,
yeah,
but that is an option.
okay. Well, maybe I can talk to you offline about these specific instances. I have no idea if it was conserved by VHCB or any, I don't know those details, but just in general, came up a bunch of times. And then the second, in related to farmland loss and Act 59, is farmland, I've gotten various people asking me about this, about how farmland is counted in Act 59, and wondered if you could help explain that.
Do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so when we did the first inventory, so one of the things that's confusing about Act 59, or the thing to keep in mind about it is that it's not a destination goal, it's sort of like every other year, let's repeat this inventory and see our progress. So our initial inventory, what we did is we tracked the reserve areas, the biodiversity conservation areas, and then the question came up of how to do natural resource management area. And what we did is we did count conserved farmland, and we counted conserved forest land that was working lands collectively,
Okay,
and applied a map layer to that to distinguish between areas that had forest land and natural cover, and then areas that were in agricultural use or open. We didn't distinguish between areas that had annual crops and meadows, but so that's how we broke it out, but we did count all of that in the initial inventory, but breaking out those areas that have annual crops, grazing, or haying going on, as opposed to the parts of farms, the almost 50% of farms that's forested, wetland, et cetera, which would have automatically, that is natural resource management, forest land, and then the farmland we just counted, but we counted it sort of distinctly and separately.
Okay, but it was for.
It's about 2.7% of the landscape is conserved agricultural and open land. So
Okay,
that's what we reported back.
and it was farmland that had specifically had a conservation easement on it,
Yes,
so not necessarily farmland that was just in current use.
we did not, in this inventory, we did not count the lands that were just in current use. There's a lot of it,
Yeah,
maybe 25 to 30% more of the state is in current use but not conserved. But that didn't, what we were asked to do was to determine the perpetually conserved land.
got it, okay,
In Act 59, the 2050 goal
yeah,
asks for a blend of permanent and non-permanent. And that's where questions about how to include both those kinds of lands, but also other incentive lands, like there are plenty of buffer programs or other things out there that are for a short period of time
mhm,
that also might be counted towards that 2050 goal.
okay, it was, and that, those might be counted in future.
We're on the cusp of answering all the questions sort of at once, and this is one we're really debating, is
Okay.
like, you know, current use it's super important. It's it's the gateway for a lot of people into conservation, or part of what we talk about as the conservation ladder. It protects millions of acres in the state. It's part of a stewardship ethos that's been really effective. But the state law is for perpetual or long-term enforceable. And it's hard to make, I don't think you can make the argument that current use that can go in or out on a particular parcel is perpetual. Right?
Yeah,
And then whether it's long-term,
yeah,
it's only, the land use change tax is pretty minimal as a check against development, but it's been very effective as a program to keep all this land in.
yeah,
Parcels go in and out all the time. So how do you count that when linguistically it really doesn't line up with what the act says? But as a program, it's been extremely successful in protecting over 30% of the landscape.
mhm,
So,
as we wrestle with this issue, there will certainly in our report be back to you the shout out of support for current use. Its vital role. There's a farmer who eventually conserved, and he would describe current use as the bridge that got into conservation.
mhm,
It is, for many landowners, it is durable and it's what they want to do, and they're not interested in conservation easements, or they're not interested until events in their life change. And that's fine, and that's why it's so important that we maintain currents. As somebody who is long in the tooth and has been through in this building at least 2, if not 3 recessions, there's been at least one occasion I can remember where the legislature either changed or underfunded current use and waived the penalties, and people were able to withdraw. So and I think ultimately, we're gonna lay it back on you of how much you want to count its durability,
mhm,
because it's not just what is the intent of the landowner at a given moment, it's also what is the intent of public policy to support current use as an ongoing investment that you make. But absolutely, we think it's a vital tool that supports the conservation work that Act 59 calls for.
okay, I mean, I wasn't in this committee when we did Act 59, so I didn't hear all this stuff, but I just get a lot of questions about how farmland is counted, so that, like, that is.
I would also say to you, the act's language is very broad. In its purposes, that includes farmland and food production.
Mhm,
There are many people, including the chair and the other body, who feel that Act 59 is specifically focused on biodiversity, and specifically what are the most special areas for biodiversity we ought to protect. That's at about 3.5%. I think most people agree we want to grow to 10%. to get to the goals of Act 59, whether it's around food production or around biodiversity, you have a ways to go. And we want to continue to do all those things. And we want to do it in a way that is in conjunction with what local communities need.
Mhm.
And not to overstress it, but there's been a lot, I mean, we hear about current use. And we hear about Act 181 almost more than we hear about Act 59 when we go out to talk about Act 59. So this is really on people's minds, and it should be. And we're glad to hear these questions. It's nice to know, I mean, it's as we work towards the kinds of programming that we'd like to see extended out into communities and the kind of like taking the work at the statewide level to help local communities think about conservation, land protection, resilience, farmland, et cetera. Knowing that at any one time, so many people are enrolled in current use, value current use, et cetera. It helps us take a common sense approach to this, which is that a lot of Vermont is protected through these other mechanisms. So we really should focus perpetual conservation where it makes the most important difference, because it's expensive
Mhm.
to conserve it, it's expensive to steward conserved acres. But it's really important because then that's something that you can invest in forever. If you want to do farming, you want to invest in that, knowing that it's always going to be a farm as an external funder helps to draw that in. That's what brings USDA in,
Mhm.
is knowing that they're helping us to perpetually protect that.
Mhm.
But that's also true for trail development and outdoor recreation. Doing that on conserved lands it's a big draw to invest in those things, knowing that the landowner's not gonna say no more trail next year.
Mhm.
You know, and same with resilience, if you wanna do a culvert and reestablish better fish passage and road resilience.
Mhm.
Doing that where the land is conserved on either side helps you to have a much bigger impact that lasts.
Mhm.
As opposed to having management activities that are out of your control, so
Mhm.
that's what we hope people will see as the distinction between these two things. Current use is great because it's not permanent.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly asking because I wanna understand this, and things are like very raw out there right now. And all of these things are all being merged together in people's minds in a way that isn't always, I don't know, it's hard.
I think the other thing that I would just urge you as you talk with your constituents in a way that we don't have the opportunity to is, from our perspective, conservation work that we have done historically and that we'll continue to do is about willing sellers and willing buyers. There's nothing about Act 59 that compels anybody to do anything. That it's not a regulatory program, it's a plan for how we get more of protecting the parts of Vermont that we all think are of most importance to protect, whether it's for recreation, for biodiversity, whatever the goal might be. And that, so it was your constituents who called us about when the scouts with camp up.
Yeah, no, I know, I love that project.
We need to find a way to protect this now that the state has turned down purchase.
And I think that's the, you put it on Act 59 is the so I'm sure nobody's being forced to do anything. It's a goal, and then finding the money to but having to make it happen. It's also important to keep in mind that we're losing force and rapidly slave code use and to personalization. So, and I also agree about the way that Kurt, I would say we've done two really brilliant things in the last 50 years in Vermont. One of those current use, the other is some conservation. It's a book and that huge positive impact on Vermont. That's good. And it was much.
Agreed.
Yeah, so
I think you get it, there's pressures on land. And we've lost a couple 100,000 acres of forest land over the last 20 years as well, on top of what we're losing in farmland, so. But I'm gonna keep going because we've got a little bit more to tell you about this morning. First of all, this is just illustrating kind of farm forest viability program there. You can see that it's, again, we're touching dozens, scores of businesses every year. So succession planning, financial management, land search and access, profitability, quality of life. These are the businesses that are working often on the conserved lands to make those, to create the value in the communities that keeps those, it maintains the community support for conservation and for the protection of land. That's just so important. So it's, we do a really great job of working with folks who are in the the sort of farm budgets, the annual nature of farm economics. We have a really good program, but we're doing more and more to think about how to create that same kind of economic support for silviculture and forestry and logging, and so the Bestwood Custom Sawing in Putney is a great story. He's a sort of niche processor. He takes black locust, he turns it into the kinds of timbers and building materials that support trail development and access into the woods. So really interesting like practices in terms of how we harvest, how we process this, and it goes right back into getting people up into the woods. So that's been a really fun project for us. And I don't know the last resort farm in Moncton, Gus.
Well, I'll just say a few words. I don't know if any of you, maybe Senator Beck served when Sam Burr was in Ledge Council.
Sam Burr?
Sam Burr, he was in the council, we might have retired from there
Yeah.
before you started, but
I know Sam.
But he was-
Chatted with him at town meeting in Moncton.
he and his wife conserved their farm in the early nineties, with our support. They divided off a chunk of land that I think about 20 houses were developed on, including a few by Habitat for Humanity. And so we helped them then, but more recently, they were viability participants, and if you know Sam, he's the sweetest guy in the world, but like many families, the issue of how to transfer his farm to the son he loves so much was not an easy one, and so the viability program supported with some consultants who helped them figure that out. And they've been able to successfully do that, so they participated in the range of programs that we offer, and they've been, again, hit our dual goals of housing and conservation.
So that we mentioned Rural Economic Development Initiative earlier. This is the program that you all helped to create. And it would, again, the focus here is on working with communities and outdoor enterprises, doing economic development work that brings money into town. So helping with grant seeking, fundraising, and doing the projects that our special focus is helping to move you forward by accessing the funding. So you can do all the planning you want, but Ready comes to town, and you can see they have this unbelievable, our investment in that program has led to, returns that almost look silly, 35 to 1 in terms of the way that that's bringing money into communities. Not, I don't know what but for means, but this is definitely something that everybody asks for more of, and everybody thinks that they're ready for more of it. So there's been a lot of pressure on that to grow, and we've really had great luck with it. And you can see, like, the community center in Bridgewater was a school that closed, that Ready Grant was able to develop that into a community center and a childcare, which has been a real big focus of Ready, and sort of doing rural economic development is helping with that. And then down below, the Mutts from Maplewood Farms is just terrific. And that was Ready supported them to get a value-added producer grant from USDA, which really helped them to sort of take the next step forward in terms of developing their facility and their ability to get that wonderful cheese out to market. So I'll only linger briefly on this because we sort of touched on it, but I think everybody here understands that what you asked us to do in Act 59 was to develop a plan to achieve this vision and these goals. The goals were sort of nationally and globally sort of like part of a movement. They weren't specifically set for Vermont, but they're really good ways of kind of targeting as we go forward. Whereas the vision is a very Vermont specific vision. Like, this is the way we think about doing conservation and community development, built infrastructure, people, and thinking about how all those things go together, right? So that it's as you can see there, that speaks to the way we want to think about this, not as like setting aside half of the world to not be touched and lived in, but protecting the landscape that people are a part of. That's the key to the way we read this, and the bias we bring to the work is that this is about seeing yourselves into the plan and into the work. That's a picture of one of the most interesting ecological parts of it, but of course it's totally related to the built landscape, which is connecting places that are divided by major infrastructure. So Route 100, Route 89, or Interstate 89, the Winooski River, the railroad has separated places, in central Vermont. Route 100 going up into Stowe separates places. And bringing that back together, doing conservation that helps to connect those three different forests for the passage of not just animals, but actual flora. It's not like the Lord of the Rings marching north, but like the, flora species move over time in response to changing conditions. And when the forests are connected, we can see that that will happen, will shift north. If the forests are disconnected, they die as islands. So that's the idea of connectivity. It's at the center of what ANR has recommended in our work back at 59 is connecting the places through the streams, the wetlands, and the forest corridors. And then these are the 4 planning criteria that you gave us. I won't get into I don't think today is a good day to go too much further than this, but you asked us to take a balanced approach to this plan, right? You can see that Vermont Conservation Design, the ANR framework that describes all the most important places for protection and categorizes them and maps them from interior forests to riparian corridors to connectors. They've got different map layers for all of it. You can see it for your town. You can see where your parcel is on it. You can see what you're part of. That's a big part of this at the scientific side. Also increasing access, not just more parking lots and trailheads, but the cultural supports that get people out into nature and the supports that get people onto land and into enterprise. So access means a few different things to us. And then there's the 2 different goals that ask us to think about building on the existing programming, the way we think about conservation in Vermont, and then enhancing that by bringing these new, that really overlay strongly ecological connection and social connection into the work we do. So how can we enhance farmland access, enhance community forests, enhance projects like Outright Vermont or Camp Dream, by also thinking about and measuring multiple goals that those achieve for ecology, for cultural access, and for sort of community development and economics. So it's not a theory of quite of everything, but I like Senator Baumgart's approach to these 2 things, current use and housing capacity. It's done a lot to protect the way we see ourselves. And there's a long way to go. We can make this work better for small communities, small groups, etc. So I'm gonna pass it back to Gus in just a second, but
Another question?
Of course, so what could you do better? I mean, it was nice to see you,
Yeah.
you and your team. I think a lot of people are waking up to what you've been doing. I mean, holistically, when you sit back from 30,000 feet, look at what you've done. It's pretty amazing, but when people realize that, oh, what's this tier 3 stuff and why is my land in it? And I can't tell you because the maps aren't ready. And they're all connected, and that's what I've been trying to do, is to sit back and look and find all the connective tissue to answer my constituents' questions. So I think the best thing you can do is provide more outreach to the public to let them know. I mean, I see it now as I look after I talk to you and your team and the people that are there. This is a good thing, and my own property is affected by it too, but I don't look at it from my standpoint. I have to look at it from my constituents. So,
well, I'll give one example of something we are thinking hard about, and Gus, you could give an example, but often state government programs are not designed with a like universal charging plug or access port. And people get really good, organizations get really good at working with whether it's ANR or VHCB or the Department of Agency of Human Services programs, whatever. You develop specialties. So land trust and others that have had community support for a long time are really good at that. What we're hearing is that we maybe didn't keep building other ports for other kinds of communities. So you said this yourself, Senator, is how can we connect more to local conservation commissions, conservation districts, smaller communities, smaller land trusts, people who have been trying to do this work, but it hasn't always been easy to connect all the way up to the mothership directly. So maybe they've been working through a larger organization who works with us, and then there's filtering that goes on and telephone games that go on in terms of what's available. So we'd like to do a better job of maintaining that network and access of clearinghouse of information and know-how and best practices, both about how to get in touch with us, but also how to work with your local conservation district, or how to enroll your lands in current use, or if you're in current use and you're interested in an ecological function, how to access the ESTA designation. And work with your county forestry. Now your land trust and others talking about how to do all of those things as part of this, like, you know, think of all the different conservation programs and all the different types of impacts that we can have.
Yeah, I think it's important that the people, the public facing people, like the clean water providers that work with, you know, the more that they understand the program and they can answer the questions from the public. You know, I get it from both sides. I get it from, you know, why aren't you doing more for conservation? And why is my land getting affected by this? So,
And I'll give it just a different kind of example and not try to get into the tier 3 discussion, but we met when I was at the Covered's annual meeting. And one of the things I heard that day was it's really hard for landowners to even donate a conservation easement even when they want to. So we went back to the board and we said, how about we set up a fund, and when somebody wants to donate, we'll pick up half the costs of that transaction, and we've done that. We just did had somebody come in with a 988 parcel, and they donated 90% of the value. So we're in all this listening, these listening sessions, yes, there's gonna be 12 in the act. We've done many more than that. We're trying to listen and figure out how can our own programming also improve and be responsive to what we're hearing, and we're happy to continue in that work.
appreciate it.
Go ahead.
So we're near time. I'm gonna run through a few things, but again, interrupt me if I'm going, if you have questions. One of the things we've always focused on are big white elephant buildings. On at least a dozen occasions now, I think it's been old schools, and right now, we just finished the very first phase up in Newport, Sacred Park, where the convent and a new building have been converted for providing housing. Phase 2 in the school will get underway this summer. And Bennington High School is under construction. It'll be 32 apartments. There's going to be a child care facility. There may be senior meals there and other community programs. Bennington, both these buildings have been vacant for more than 3 decades. Bennington was so committed to this, they used $3 million of local money to support what is a $50 million redevelopment, 2 different kinds of tax credits, one for housing, one for community development. I know there was a recent tour for legislators from Orleans County, and everybody in Newport's excited about redevelopment at Sacred Heart. So that's a cornerstone of work we've done, but it's not the only place we've been involved in with school buildings. And likely there's going to be more of that in the future. This is just to speak to
This is the, I have to, you know, saying that my project is transformative. It's a whole downtown that is now gonna be flooding. So that's all I'm just saying.
And often our role is to be the first people who show up and give a project credibility. We don't fund the whole thing, but it lets it move forward. And that's what, my board visited St. Jay this fall, when we were at the railroad station, that's what Kitty Cole said, but you gave us the first dollars, that gave us the confidence to move forward. I think we were the first dollars in the big project in the downtown as well. So this is the range of housing programs. I'm not going to read them all to you, but a number of them are new since the pandemic began, including the Career Tech Ed program, farm worker housing program, shelter improvements. We've doubled the state shelter capacity. The woman you see pictured here is a homeowner who is contributing her sweat equity in conjunction with Habitat for Humanity. We've built about 170, maybe 180 homes with Habitat all over the state. We're working on how to ramp that up. The Rutland chapter has just bought a new facility, and they're going to be panelized construction with a couple service organizations indoors in order to speed construction. This particular parcel was divided off of a conservation project because it was close to the road and not important. And that's happened on about 5 occasions. These 3 of them with the Nature Conservancy. There's a new one happening in Walcott along Route 15 right now. We get asked a lot about housing supply and housing needs. The cost of the average home in Vermont, according to Zillow, is about doubled in the last 6 years. But where do we need? What price points do we need to hit? Who needs help? And what this chart is telling you is whether you're looking at rental or home ownership, half the need is for people who are below 80% median. And the market can't produce housing at a cost that those folks can afford. It just is too expensive. And even when you get to the next range of 80 to 120, people are really stretched. The folks above that likely can find things in the market. They may not like their choices. They may think it costs too much, especially if it's somebody who relocated from the heartland. But they can find their way. So when you think about, as our budgets tighten, where do we need to invest? I think it really is going to be focused on the workforce that's in the blue in this chart. A word again about your mission and density. This is a development and the catalytic impact we can have. This is the old Catholic diocese in Burlington. This is not built out yet, but we funded the first 2 buildings that happened on this site. But it's also, if we could build to this density, which is 70 units an acre, we need 500 acres to meet the state's housing needs. You say, well, we're never doing that in St. Johnsbury or Middlebury or any place else in Vermont. If we built at 1/10 of that density, 5,000 acres, and if you cut it in half, and we're talking about quarter-acre lots, still we just need 10,000 acres to meet our current housing needs. So you don't have to have a huge negative impact on the landscape we love to meet our housing needs. We need to do it thoughtfully. The other part of this story is, again, housing and conservation. Eric Farrell bought the Catholic diocese for about $6 million. He could have put 12 starter castles on that property with wonderful views of the lake and gotten his money back. But he said our community needs something more than that. There was great opposition to dense development until the Vermont Land Trust got together with the City of Burlington and raised a little over $1 million, including some funding from us, for the 12 acres that sit along the lake and turned it into a public park. And then the opposition to dense development went away, and we were able to get this done. And we've seen that on more than one occasion. But again, we were the first dollars in. That helped Eric invest in more buildings. We're going to have affordable housing sitting next to SD Ireland just put up a condominium project where it costs $1 to $2 million to buy a home. So, and without the policy of permanent affordability, if you just time limited how long housing had to be affordable, this would become an economically gated neighborhood. So we think that that policy has a huge amount of merit, as does the marriage of housing and conservation.
Is that some of that mixed income or is it all?
In this development, there are going to be 3 buildings of rental housing, one of which is senior, that is entirely affordable, but the buildings next to it are market rate, including one being built by SD Ireland that had been built by SD Ireland, where you can spend $2 million on a condominium. Probably that means you get the view of the lake. This is where your dollars have gone for housing over the that you've invested in us since 2020, since the pandemic began. When we finished the year, I think we'll top 6,000 households. I'd ask you to take a few things away from this slide. One is for every dollar you gave us, we leveraged about $2. The second is that while it is true, and you've heard a lot of people say it, that a home today costs $500,000 or $600,000, and that's too expensive. Our average investment across all kinds of projects is just $80,000. When we're doing new construction or substantial rehab, like those schools, we're putting in probably twice that amount. But what we are doing is leveraging private investment, federal grants, philanthropic grants. So we're trying to push the state money to do as much as possible. The third thing I'll ask you to take away from the slide is on the right side, you see a whole bunch of housing for people with special needs that includes having doubled shelter capacity, the first floor recovery residences in Vermont for people struggling with addiction, and other kinds of supports.
Before we leave that slide, I just want to make a note for the future, unless I forget, that I would like to, at some other point, have a conversation with you all about lead abatement and asbestos abatement and kinds of home repairs that are sort of physical in nature. And I have a lot of questions about funding sources and
We just had a grant renewed despite the changes in Washington, so there's another $5 million flowing to Vermont over the next 4 years for lead paint abatement.
it's great. More on
There
that.
isn't this good of a program for citizens, so you should talk about it.
Okay, would love to chat.
Yeah.
The purpose of this slide is to tell you who we house and what professions in the workforce we're able to house. And so you see, it is what I often call the essential workforce, people who cannot work remotely, but have to show up to drive a truck, to be in childcare, to teach, to maintain a building, to provide social services. And our statute lets us go to median income. Federal tax credit, which is our primary federal source, limits us to 60% of median. So when we're doing tax credit housing, it's generally 60% of median. We usually take 20% of the units and have them not be tax credit units and at a higher level in order to have mixed income. The photo you're looking at is another one of those catalytic projects. We funded 4 projects in the TIF district in St. Albans. In total, about 150 of the 270 unit build out. This is an elderly development. It's being heated by geothermal. Many of our buildings are all electric. That's going to get harder unless we get some relief from Washington because of the new Buy America, Build America standards, and it's hard to just find air source heat pumps built in America. But this one has geothermal. It's an elderly project, 33 homes. And one of the people who moved in is somebody who worked in healthcare her whole life, then had her own healthcare crisis, found herself homeless, and now is a permanent home here in the downtown. In home ownership, we do something called shared equity. We recently opened a 26 unit condominium in Shelburne that's part of a 94 unit redevelopment, the balanced housing. Among the homeowners was a state trooper. One of these fellows is a chef at Shelburne Farms. 2 people work at Wake Robin. So in terms of housing the workforce, Shelburne, I think, is feeling really good about this development. We've also taken a look at what happens over time to these shared equity homes. And the last 55 sales of a home that we subsidized many years ago, where the original investment averaged $27,000, allowed, without any further public funding, for somebody to buy a home on average $136,000 below market value. So the value of the state's investment, whether it was made in 1990 or in the aughts, has grown significantly so that these homes are able to transfer, even as interest rates have doubled in the last 5 years, to people averaging 83% of median, with half the buyers below 60%. So I think your investment is going well. One of the things you did a few years ago was to create Act 186, which provided feasibility funding to help a parents group who are folk whose kids have developmental or intellectual disabilities. We've now brought 6 projects with 37 units of housing into development. Some are already have been built, like the one building you see there in Moncton. That's an intentional community for people whose disabilities require lots of support. They've just given us an application for a second building on that site, and there are plans for 2 beyond that. Champlain Housing Trust has taken on a more independent set of apartments in Burlington, with some apartments set aside for support staff as well. So that's underway. So it's one of the ways we're trying to respond to people who have some very specific needs, and I think you'll see more of that in the future. I want to assure you that there's lots. I already described Putney and Newport as things that are coming online this spring. And here are a number of other projects in Rutland, in Waterbury, in Burlington, and Stonecroft and Middlebury that will be open by August. And the Middlebury project, another one of those where the first dollars in, and the plan is ultimately a 200 unit mixed income neighborhood with lots and lots of single family home ownership. We have a huge pipeline ahead of us. It is down a little bit because developers look at, does the state have money or not to support our developments? So as they're seeing the debate you're having and seeing the fiscal projections, they're not going out and spending as much money optioning properties, getting engineering done, doing all the early work, but it's still a very sizable pipeline, larger than we can fill. And if you want to see what opportunity looks like, you can take a walk down to Elm Street, and behind the federal building is a parking lot. And the Montpelier Commission on Resilience has done some early feasibility work. They believe 70 apartments can go on that parking lot. While they also try to figure out how to get that building back into operation. The federal government has got it on the market now.
Building would be elevated, I think, apartment would be. I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so, yeah.
Yes.
If I recall that it's an auction at this point, is that,
That's where it's headed, is to an auction.
and do we know when that's happening?
We do not.
Okay, alright.
And just to get back to conservation, and this, we're closing out, is the Bird Eye Wildlife Management Area. We've done 2 different deals conserving a total of 2,800 acres. And when I first showed this in the other body, Representative Helen pointed to a spot on the landscape, tell us where we've gotten the buck 1 year. So we know it's good hunting habitat. And with all that you hear from a variety of constituents, we are supporting the hunting community along with the hiking community, with the wildlife watching the community. All those things are all important. They're all part of like Vermonters care about this landscape. And we look forward to working with you to do more of it. And I know we're now over time, so we should probably stop.
Just a
Go ahead.
quick comment and a question. So you guys are kind of like at the center of a lot of things that are going on. What do you do if somebody comes and says, I want to do this with my land, or I want to do this with a building or house? I said it about most every agency in the state. We ought to have a navigator in every county that we can come to and say, I want to do this. What's the best route?
So,
All the state senator. Yes, seriously.
we generally, the way our statute works is that eligible applicants for our funding are municipalities or nonprofits. And we generally work through a series of nonprofits who bring projects to us. So we often, we're about to break ground on a building in Barry City for flood recovery. 31 unit apartment building, and we got down street together with the city of Barry after the flooding 23. They identified a location, and down street went ahead and got an architect to do some drawings, and they began their feasibility work. So we often are tying people together. Some years ago, we had a call as the state colleges were going through their financial problems from the president. We went and visited with them, and we did a tour of several campuses, and we identified McClellan Hall as a building that on the Johnson campus that could be pretty easily converted to housing. And that should probably get under construction late fall this year. So we got an application. I've been together with an organization that looked at that, and that comes in. So we try to make those connections wherever we can. But often the nonprofits are the people we direct folks to with an idea, whether it's a conservation idea or a housing idea. Again, when Senator Hardy's constituents called and said the state won't buy Boy Scout camp, we called the Vermont Land Trust, and they looked around for a partner to help buy that land and revitalize it.
So my community is Greenbelt College. So a lot of opportunity there.
Did I just read that there was gonna be a new buyer of the campus?
So they put our piece out looking for, they wants to donate it to a nonprofit. So
Yeah, I'm happy for us to go to Putney. The other group that has done a lot of this kind of work, and they just hosted an event at Sterling College, is the Preservation Trust of Vermont. And so we'd be happy to make a visit to Putney and
Holding.
yeah, not to be confused with Putney. Right
We've done
outside.
Putney, we've been to Putney enough.
And there's a group of private alumni that actually still live there that want to get involved in it.
Okay,
A lot of interest.
all right, well, let's make a visit.
Well, thank you, and I just wanna back up to the money, real quick, just to make sure that I'm understanding that aspect of it. So you're in the governor's recommend at the full PTT amount, there's no extra, I'm just recalling that one slide. There's no extra allocations from the general fund.
No, there is a recommendation for capital bill above the PTT amount for clean water activities.
Okay. Great, And can you, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we often hear people say, fully fund VHCB. Do you consider this fully funded?
This follows what the statute requires, and what I would say to you is over the last 5 years, you've been able to overfund us with one-time dollars. And I can promise you that if you found any one-time dollars.
You would take them.
That we could put to work. We did make a pitch for the governor. That was not successful, and one of our requests, there's actually another. It was the Act 69 study group that recommended an ongoing fund for. The folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, because there's a need to find housing for that somebody folks. And as I'm sure you've heard from the parents, a number of them are getting to be not my age, then near my age, and they're worried about the future for the group.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, that would be great to
Important
put more
future
money
need.
into that.
And just to follow up on this too, so it was in the governor's recommended, and this was also supported by the House.
Supported by the House, so Senator Westman says we're boring this year, and I think that was a
That's it.
compliment.
I was gonna say, the appropriations land, that's a good thing.
Yes,
All right, thank you so much, really appreciate it.
okay, well, thank you for making the time.
Yeah.
And to be with you.
And I'm thinking that now might be a good time to take a quick break. So let's meet back at 10.
because he hasn't.
Thank you, Trey.
Thanks.
Oh, we're live. Okay, this is Natural Resources and Energy coming back from a break. And we are joined by Michelle Monroe from the conservation districts.
And I don't know, is Dan?
He didn't accept, you didn't accept the invitation.
I sent it to him, I forwarded it to him,
Did you, let me just double check.
and he said that he had gotten it.
Do you want to take a break until?
He said he was waiting for someone to let him in. He had tried to log in and didn't get. But Dan's having an appointment, so I was, but he should get it first. We can get him on. But I can start on a couple of quick things before Dan comes. Sure. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about our. Oh, he may have had to leave, he had an appointment later, so. But one of the, you're all of you are familiar with us, we were in earlier, you know the work that we do. And when you mentioned there should be somebody you can call, well, we're actually the people you call, when you say, I've got a plot of land, I want to do something with it, or you're a farmer, and you're like, I've got regulatory pressures, I need to do this, we're the people that folks call. And so I don't want to go too much into the work we do, because you've heard about that quite a bit.
You're the navigator.
Yeah, we do a lot of navigation, particularly for farmers, but not only for farmers, for towns and for residents. So our budget request, this year was for 942,000. The House has put in the budget 912,612 in base, which was in the governor's budget, and then 300,000 in one-time funds. That is the amount that Senate Agriculture also supported in their budget letter. And that is the amount that both, the House Agriculture also supported that, and House Environment supported the 942 cost. Just so and we're hoping that you all will also support the 912.
Is there a slide for that in here?
I didn't do, I didn't have time to prepare slides, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Those
there
are
are slides. Oh, these are not your slides?
There are older slides from our testimony in February,
Oh,
but I did not supply slides today.
Okay.
Yeah, I am not a PowerPoint person.
That was best. I was looking at some slides. I was like, are they? I don't not their slides. I was doing the same thing. So yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about some of the pressures that we're seeing from the federal side, because there's a lot going on the federal side that I don't think that the state's aware of, and that we just wanted to make sure that the legislature is aware of. So we were created in the 30s. In Vermont, we were created in 1939 to be partners for the Natural Resources Conservation Service at USDA. So we work very closely with NRCS. And most of the work that we do with them is funded by what are called cooperative agreements. So we sign an agreement with them to do work that we are working in their offices, on their computers, we drive their vehicles, and we do their work at a lower cost than it would cost them to hire a federal employee. And so statewide, we're employing about 20 conservation planners between the ACD and the districts who are out on the ground helping landowners and farmers develop plans for what they want, how they're going to manage their land, and then use those plans to apply for funds from NRCS to do work on their land, to identify whether that's they're going to conserve a wetland, they're going to plant a buffer, they're going to fix a gully, they're going to install fencing, and we're going to help them with a grazing plan so they can rotation graze, whatever farmers want to do on their land, basically, that touches on conservation, we help with. That includes installing irrigation systems. So right now, NRCS cannot enter into any new cooperative agreements. They can't extend any existing cooperative agreements. And so this is endangering partner relationships across the country. We have lost 2 foresters in Vermont that were working under a cooperative agreement, a national cooperative agreement with the National Wild Turkey Federation. This has cut the capacity to do forestry planning in Vermont. There were only 4 employed, and 2 NRCS and 2 partners, and then private.
just a broad defined cooperative agreement.
So I have an agreement with NRCS. NRCS says you have X amount of dollars to employ a person to do wetlands reserve easement work for NRCS. And that I have a cooperative agreement that lets me employ that person, who then is out doing all kinds of wetlands work. So she is the education and outreach person. She helps explain to interested landowners how to enroll in programs. And she does some monitoring and management meetings as well. So VCD has 14 staff who are just working embedded in NRCS offices, providing technical support to NRCS, doing NRCS work alongside them. And they're really crucial to getting conservation work done across the city. And so they're paid with these cooperative agreements.
So you're an extension of the federal program, boots on the ground.
Yeah, boots on the ground.
For Vermont.
Yes, and then we also use some of those cooperative agreements are also funding district staff who are doing the same thing.
So are you answerable to the agency of ag?
We have some agency of ag funding and we often combine it, like we employ, because NRCS lost a bunch of engineering capacity. They've already, we didn't have enough engineering capacity, and then they lost a lot of engineers over the last year because they employ a lot of young engineers right out of college, and then those staff at the beginning of their careers were the ones that we lost, along with, it was either people at the beginning of their careers or people at the end, and we lost engineers at both parts of that spectrum in Vermont and NRCS. So we hired an engineer, funded 50% with clean water funding through the agency, Vermont Agency of Ag, and 50% through a cooperative agreement. And that person is based in Rutland and is doing primarily irrigation systems on farms in the southern part of the state for drought mitigation. So those are the kinds of staff that we've been employing to try and address these needs. So we're in touch with the federal delegation. There's nothing that the state can do, but we wanted to make you aware of the pressures that we are seeing on the conservation workforce across the state. And it's not just unfortunately NRCS. US Fish and Wildlife has the same problem, and their cooperative agreements are a little different. They aren't employing staff so much as they're giving us funding. They give districts funding, and it's unfortunate Dan couldn't do this because he has held he's held these cooperative agreements for the Winooski district, which is Washington and Chicopee counties. But also watershed groups have them. Other sometimes state agencies can have them, but the ones from US Fish and Wildlife are how we scope and do initial design on culvert upgrades and dam removals. So this is a whole chunk of money that is now not accessible. And I think if you want, I can probably get you exact funds, but now this money that is really how we get these projects in the pipeline for upgrading our culverts and taking out our dams is gone, because US Fish and Wildlife they weren't able to do any cooperative agreements in the last fiscal year, and they aren't able to do it in this fiscal year for the federal government. So it's really endangering that pipeline of projects, because this is how we get them off the ground. And it's really essential for clean water and flood mitigation and wildlife habitat, fish habitat. So there's this whole that is developing in multiple aspects of conservation work in the state as a result of essentially the Office of Managing the Budget being deeply suspicious of these agreements and putting a letter up with the scope and refusing to release funds for new ones. So the other piece that's happening with the federal government with NRCS specifically is that they have payment rates set payment rates that are set nationally for every practice that they have, which is hundreds of practices that farmers and forest landowners and others can put on the landscape that NRCS will pay part of the cost of. They've reduced those payment rates for almost every practice. And so farmers are pulling their applications. They're putting applications on hold. Farmers apply when the applications were due January 15th and the new payment rates were out. So they applied with the old payment rates. So now they're going to go and get a contract to say, hey, here's your contract for cover cropping, and they're going to find out that the payment rate has dropped dramatically. We're particularly concerned about forest rates. The rates for some of the forest rates for things like brush management have dropped. There was one forestry practice where you would have been paid under a contract from last year, $1,600 per acre over 3 years. The payment rate for that practice is now $90 an acre over 3 years. So if you wanted to do some agroforestry, a lot of our farmers are finding that they're pasturing animals, that they need to get some trees out there to provide some shade as the days are getting hotter in the summer. stems were costing us, NRCS was reimbursing at $40 a stem, now it's $13 a stem. So it's a whole wide range of practices that that landowners just, and farmers just aren't gonna be able to afford to do. So we're really concerned about how this is gonna play out over the field season. We don't know yet because NRCS is still, they have a ranking, like people apply and then they go through and they rank the applications and then the top applications get funded. So we don't know how, people don't have their those contracts yet, so we don't know what's gonna happen there, but it's.
Is one of them, one of the practices that they have been able to get funding for, at least in the past, grazing? Is there?
Yeah, I haven't, the grazing rates are also have gone down, although virtual fencing has gone up. So if you wanna buy equipment to install virtual fencing, that payment rate has gone up. But other payment rates are going down.
Okay,
But
and is the deadline already passed? for
we had to,
this?
the applications for EQIP, which is the largest NRCS program, were due January 15th.
Okay, so I just spoke with a farmer in my district recently about and I don't know specifically if they had applied, but they were talking about some of these issues, so.
Yeah,
Um,
it's, and yeah,
And then is there a farm size that is? Are there requirements for farm size? Or in terms of numbers of livestock or numbers of acres or anything like that?
They're not, oftentimes larger farms compete better in the process because they're just putting the practice on a larger
That's exactly
scale.
what, yeah,
And so that's
saying to me.
that's a problem. And that sort of ties into the next thing that I was gonna talk about, which was this grant that you all heard about at the beginning of the session, the $8 million in financial assistance for farmers and landowners that we lost. One of the advantages of that grant was that it was targeted towards smaller and mid-sized farms that often don't compete as well in regular NRCS programs.
Okay,
And so that funding was, $8 million for flood mitigation practices and clean water practices. And then wildlife habitat, because often those three things go together. So that was targeted towards that type of work. And so we're very concerned about what the loss of that is going to mean for small farms being able to access money for practices on the ground. And that grant came, it was $8 million in financial assistance, but it was $2.7 million in technical assistance. The conservation districts were one of the subcontractors on that technical assistance. And as was Red Star, it was just for Red Star Forestry, which is a private company. And so now we have lost the funding to do that technical assistance. And so that has been another blow to the technical assistance provision, particularly on the forestry side, because we just don't have the foresters to do the work. NRCS only has 2 people who do forestry planning. The districts have some, there's a few private companies like Red Star who just don't have the capacity to meet the forestry project. So this resulted in like more than 90 stranded forestry applications, and they pulled that funding.
Well, yes,
We got the programs out there and the requirements, who picks up the slack in the meantime for the foresters?
That's a good question.
County foresters pick it up.
The county foresters can do some, but they're not really doing like the kind of project planning that NRCS needs to fund work on the ground. They can help with forest management plans and advise people, but they're not really doing that.
Because federal requirements are different than the state requirements, or?
I think, I cannot speak completely to what the county foresters do versus what our NRCS and NRCS or co-located foresters do. But that is certainly one of the challenges. I just wanted to highlight for folks, this is a need for folks. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and we were asked by NRCS to hire 2 foresters. But we can't do it without funding, and they can't get this funding. So, and this is sort of, it just is a bit of a crisis. And we also are concerned that there's gonna be a lot more demand on the state programs because of the cut in federal payment rates. So the state does have smaller versions of, they have programs that they run with clean water money to assist with things like cover cropping and other practices on farms. But they don't have the capacity to pick up what NRCS may be dropping. But I mean, NRCS is plenty of money. They're just paying at such a low rate that it may not, that farms may not be. So I wanted to bring those things to your attention. And then I'm happy to talk about anything else you would like to talk about. Certainly we can talk about districts and our work, because unfortunately Dan wasn't able to join us, except right at 10, so.
Okay.
I just got one newsletter from the County Conservation District.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, so, the sort of the practices have also impacted what we've talked to you, I think, about in the past about our local fund goals. Where we go, the districts run a process every year, public process where we engage with our local landowners and residents to identify what the top conservation concerns are in the district. And then we take those concerns to NRCS. This is actually a requirement, this process is in federal statute, that districts do this. And our NRCS here in Vermont is one of 6 states where they will then take and set aside money from their general overall budget for practices that address the concerns identified in each district. And so last year we were able to bring 4.4 million focused on specific practices, and then not only the person competing, the only farms competing for that money are in the district. So it's been very helpful in Bennington, which doesn't always compete as well because it doesn't have impaired watersheds in Vermont, right? So people are going, well, why, it just doesn't rank as well. So they've it's been really helpful because then the only farmers who compete for that money are farmers. And so they're not competing with Franklin County farmers who are in highly impaired watersheds. So that has been really helpful, and this year we're anticipating 5 million in local fund goals across the state. That's awesome. Great. Yeah.
I know that county forestry stretched pretty thin too. So I had contacted one of the actually had used the Bennington County forestry to deal with my issue.
Yeah.
A couple things, it would be really helpful for you to lay out the funding situation, more like where you get your funding.
Sure.
What
Where we get our
costs are,
funding from?
what
Sure.
are the,
Absolutely.
and maybe you've done this in the past and I just don't remember it or whatever, but having a visual would be helpful for me.
Okay.
This is where you can get funding through these sources, and these are the ones that are impaired by what's going on at the federal level. These are the ones that still exist. That would be helpful to see, because trying to figure out that sort is a little complicated. And then I do want to ask you, because I haven't read the whole thing because it just came in last night, but we received a sort of listening session report from the conservation districts about Act 59, and I'm wondering if you're prepared to speak to that.
I have not looked at what people put together. I was in the State House all day yesterday, so I have not seen that came from one of the districts. But the districts received funding from, several of the districts received money from VHCD. So I am a little. Yeah, several districts received money from VHCD to hold these Act 59 listening sessions that are laid out, sort of VHCD provides the information. So I have not looked at that.
Okay.
It could be something that maybe we can have a time where we.
Yeah.
Some time to dig a
I
little
think-
deeper into that.
Yeah, in general, what we saw at the listening sessions is then that there's a lot of confusion between Act 59 and Act 181. And so people think that they're mad about Act 59, but they're really mad about Act 181. And so that has been a recurring theme.
Or vice versa.
Yeah,
Good.
even as I'm talking to Vermonters, like even our district, some of our district staff and district managers, I had to like really carefully explain like there's the difference between the two bills. So I would not be surprised if there is a lot of Act 181 sort of resentment in there, or concern or fear. There's a lot of fear around back 181. And I think that we'll see that will be in those listening sessions. I think the fear from Act 59 came more from that 50 by 50, like, oh my God, we're gonna permanently conserve 50% of the land in Vermont. And so people explain like 50 by 50 is not permanent conservation for all 50%. It's permanent conservation for 30%, and then another form of conservation for the remaining 20. So, but that, once you explain that, people seem to relax a lot more about that. But I had not, I saw that when I got home last night, but I was here.
Yeah.
At caucus hearing, so I did not.
I mean, I
So
I think that it's pretty, I don't know, it's strongly worded.
I have no doubt about that, considering who wrote it, and also I would say that document has not gone through a consensus process amongst the conservation district.
Oh, that's very interesting, because it was sent to legislators as, and said it was a consensus doc.
Yeah, we have not had a consensus discussion about
Oh,
that,
interesting, okay.
so. Yeah, sorry for that little peek into internal politics, but yeah, we did not, so we will be discussing that on Monday evening, but.
And I hope that it, related to 181, that you all get in to testify in the House, to talk about S325.
Yes, when I spoke yesterday, at the rural caucus, I expressed our support for S325, that we wanna see a pause on tier 3 in particular, so that we can have a time to run a process where we really get and really hear from Vermonters about what is the best way forward for balancing these competing interests of, we do need conservation, right? We need to reduce forest fragmentation, we need to protect headwaters of our rivers and streams. We need to protect wildlife corridors as wildlife is moving in response to climate change. We need to protect rare and vital habitats and endangered species. Like, we need to do those things, but how do we do that in a way? How do we do that and also allow monitors to make a living from the land and to have use of the land? And so I think that is the question that we need to address, and we need to do it by talking to Vermonters. And that's a place where I think the districts can play a role, because of that long history of having this goal of engaging the local person and bringing input back.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because I mean, I think that was our intention with the pause, was to allow more time to talk about it and see, how it can be changed, or because I completely agree. There's just a lot of misinformation out there. I think 325 was meant to do that pause, and people were like, yeah, anyway, so I hope that you get in to testify in the House about it. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Super.
Well, so I just wanna make sure that I am understanding, the ask that you all have, which is, because it's, 612, or sorry, 912.
Yes.
Total 612 days. And then how did that fare with the governor's recommend in the House?
The governor's recommend was 612 base, so
Just that, and how did it end up in the House?
it ended up in the House at 612 base and 300 one time. We were
Okay.
hoping to increase the base, but we'll take the one time.
Yeah.
Did the governors recommend it at one time?
No,
No one time, okay.
Okay,
but it did not reduce us, which they have done in the past. So they would reduce us, and then we would say, then we would come and ask for more, and then they,
Okay.
like, we played that dance for a few years, and that, so it was gratifying, they didn't reduce us this year.
And so your request to us would be to support the one time plus the base plus the one.
yeah, that's the House's version.
Support balance.
Yes,
Yeah.
this for the House,
Yeah.
it's in the House budget, we're not asking for more,
Okay.
what it's like, but also wanted to make you aware of sort of the federal issues that are ongoing.
Yeah, it, like I said, it would be helpful, because I'm hearing from people about this funding thing, and it was confusing to me whether this was a state issue or a federal issue, and it sounds like it's federal money that this. I
Yes,
was-
and we also, we are funded with through the agricultural clean water improvement program. I don't remember what the ag stands for, AgCWIP. is one of the largest sources of state funded TA dollars that comes out of the Clean Water Fund through the agency of ag. And so some districts, did receive. There was just a new grant round, they just learned how much they received, and some districts are receiving less than they have in the past. And so that. Obviously, they're unhappy about that,
That would be helpful to include in your.
yeah, so it's not everyone, so.
Okay,
Thank you.
super, thank you so much.
I know, I think, and never to Denise.
Okay.
I'm only happier at missing Gary.
Okay, well, let's take.
Do you want to take a break?
Yeah.
Let's take a break.
Sounds good.
Sorry, Jess.
All the main.
If I
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the Natural Resources and Energy coming back from a break. We are joined by folks from the Vermont Council on Rural Development. Yes, welcome.
And the.
Oh, and, I'm sorry, and
DHCD.
there we go.
Yeah.
Right, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for inviting us. I appreciate it. My name is Gary Holloway. I'm the downtown program manager of the Department of Housing and Community Development. And we partners with Vermont Council on Rural Development for this Converta initiative. Which is what I'm here to talk about today. Sorry, I'm just going to advance my. It's not set. Hold on, there it is. So the Vermont evaluation from Rural Technical Assistance actually was something that was started in this committee as part of Act 181. And really the purpose of the study was to evaluate, assess how Vermont supports its rural communities and how that system can be strengthened to better deliver housing, infrastructure, climate resilience, and economic development. And the task was to assess the technical assistance system, identify the challenges and barriers and gaps and strengths, and then recommend practical improvements. So this work was done over the course of 2025, and we put together a report that I had made available with a link to the committee assistant. I have copies here of the condensed report, which was from the steering committee. And UVM, who was a partner in this initiative with us for the Center for Rural Studies. This sheet here, I'm happy to pass around, is kind of like a snapshot of the recommendations, kind of bite size. So I'll pass that around to folks, as well as the report itself. There is a longer report that is 100+ pages, and you're welcome to read that as well. We've had really all the data information we gathered through the study. But this is like 17-page condensed report with high-level recommendations that I'm going to review today for you all. So we put together a project steering committee, which is made up of organizations around the state that provide technical assistance and resources to municipalities around the state, including Vermont Council on Development. You can see, I'm not going to read them all here, but you can see a wide range of folks that you're familiar with that were part of steering this project along, and are continuing to lead to strategize on implementation. So, you know, at the root of it, you know, we're looking at challenges, in rural communities across Vermont. There's a lot of expectations for volunteer-run boards and committees and towns with small staff that are expected to do some really big things, addressing everything from housing to infrastructure to climate resiliency, economic development. And then, they have part-time staff and limited volunteer hours. So it's complex. It's a complex system for them to navigate, at the state level, certainly. As well as just trying to understand like where are the menu of options for us to choose from. So that is kind of at the heart of this challenge, capacity constraints. So there's missed opportunities, there's delayed projects, there's higher costs, and quite frankly inequitable outcomes. So the approach in the study was to really ensure that Vermonters had a chance to kind of weigh in, particularly focused on the folks that are being impacted from the municipal level. So there was a lot of listening sessions with regional planning commissions, with staff and volunteers from planning commissions to select boards and councils across the state. So we had about 190 participants in those listening sessions. Folks that weren't able to attend the listening sessions, had surveys that they filled to help us with their input. We met with 5 different states and how they were looking at providing technical assistance and getting resources. We also, UVM had students investigate a number of different other states, 11 states, and really kind of dove in and pulled some of that data that you can find in the larger report. And then we had a statewide summit that pulled together a lot of these folks, and we welcomed people from all across the state, some legislators were able to participate. It was really an active, it was a game show format. Rebecca Sanborn Stone, a lot of credit to her, she's very creative, engaged tables all around the room to kind of really dive in, come up with some solutions and some ideas. And so all those are also in the larger report. If you want to see some of the outcomes of the game show that we participated in, it was very, very fun. Right?
I was there.
So anyway, all of that fed into this report and these findings. So the findings were consistent across the region. Technical assistance, there's lots of it, but it's fragmented, and how it's communicated or accessed is broken. It's not always consistent. It's hard for folks to figure out how to access what they need. And sometimes we insert and we address something short term, but then that goes away and it's not sustainable. So we don't really have a mechanism to kind of keep that, provide that assistance in a sustainable way at a local level. So they need continuity in these simpler programs. So some of the summary of the findings, capacity is certainly one of the binding constraints, having the administrative burdens, coordination, as I mentioned, or communication, is systemic. And having program design that really works for them and not just, works for us. We're delivering the program, but does it really work? Are we listening to folks where they're coming from to make sure it's matching where their needs are at? Evidence from other states points to, coordinated solution. We don't necessarily need to reinvent something. We have it, but like, how can we better coordinate together to deliver that these services? So there was 4, high level actionable priority areas here, and I'm going to touch on these in the following slides. But increasing state agency participation in solving local challenges, municipal and regional shared service tools, local engagement and leadership development, and increasing local capacity and flexible resources. So the priority 1, municipalities face fragmented state systems and inconsistent state involvement. And so how can we better, once again, look at the systems we have and reevaluate them from like agency to department to department, right? I managed some programs. We recently went through the Downtown Transportation Fund, for example, and I figured out like, what are statutory requirements? What are things that we've just asked for all the time that maybe we don't need to have them do? And really try to kind of boil down what it is that we're asking for in an application, right? So like, that's an example of like a very, very small little program, but can we do that and look at state programs and how we're coordinating with each other to make it a little simpler and digestible for folks who are filling out these applications and trying to access the grants. And I'll also mention, I'll mention that later. So priority 2, regional shared service tools. So there's a lot of examples of communities doing good things, but are they sharing that information, that knowledge with other communities? I can think of an example when we were on a call post 2023 floods with folks in Marshfield, and they said, wouldn't it be nice if we had kind of a shared service model for, to have engineers on their retainer, so that, we're not all going through this process of trying to rebuild bridges and hire engineers, so we can all kind of have this pool already kind of baked out and available for us. Everything from that to having, shared service agreements, legal agreements that can share equipment or to share different types of services from municipality to municipality. They don't need to kind of reinvent the wheel. These are an easy way for them to kind of feel better from a legal standpoint, have things thought out for them that they can just kind of implement and partner with neighboring towns on certain services and shared equipment or whatever appropriate. Priority area 3, local engagement and leadership development. This is something that, obviously we have providers like the Vermont Council on Rural Development and others that are providing this, this service and helping to engage the community through facilitating discussions, maybe providing them some skills to kind of build that leadership in-house so it becomes more sustainable at a local level. We can't just expect someone's going to swoop in and solve their problems. They need to also figure out at their level
on how they can kind of build a solid base of volunteers and leadership development that can be sustainable. But it is our responsibility as, you know, at the state level as well as, you know, other partners to kind of help provide those resources and at times embed maybe a fellow or a, you know, a multi-year person to kind of help develop that system that can be and walk away and have that in place, right? So then priority for increasing local capacity and flexible resources. What we heard a lot is, you know, a lot of our funding is tied to very specific things, and communities have kind of a myriad of challenges that they're facing. Can we provide communities flexible funding that can help address kind of multiple needs, as opposed to just like, I have to apply for this one thing for this specific, you know, transportation project, and then I have to find another source for this very specific thing. And it is complicated between federal and state money, and it's easier said than done, but is there a little bit easier of a way that we can provide some flexible resources to communities to kind of give them a bit of a break? And then they certainly have to apply for these bigger funding to address some larger needs. But they oftentimes lack the capacities, you know, to even know where to start. We have some good existing programs like the READY program through the HCB that provides assistance to help kind of do some of that grant writing and to help kind of leverage additional investments. And we've had some, you know, MTAP, Municipal Technical Assistance Program. Can we reimagine that? Can we, you know, is that something we can continue and look at and see how we can continue to provide those, you know, level of services, you know, to municipalities? So just a couple more slides here, and I'll pass it off to Denise. But the recommendations coordinated together can help improve coordination, reduce administrative burdens, expand capacity in low staff volunteer-run towns, and help them figure out a sustainable way that can be a little bit more long-lasting and impactful. Promoting equitable access so that, you know, everyone feels like they have a place to access these resources. Maybe there's a portal or there's a common communication place, you know, at the state where they can go to get information and not have to, maybe on the side of the areas, I'll just call him and he'll tell me, you know, so maybe there's more of a central place where this can be coordinated together. Better align public-private and philanthropic investments. And you know, one thing I'll say is that, you know, where does this all live, right? Like if you're gonna have a centralized hub, is it better to be done at the regional level? Is it better to be done, you know, more at a local, embedded at the local level? Or is it a combination of like, we need something at the state, we need things to be regionally allocated, but then we also at times we do need to embed some additional support in specific communities for different things.
Yes, but can I ask my question?
Yeah.
Did you look at all about improving county government in Vermont and whether that would be a model that could actually do pretty much all the things you're listing here?
Yeah, it was you'll see that as you read through the report, you'll see that, you know, the revisiting of the conversations that have happened in the past around new governance structures, including, you know, we don't have, you know, county government, like, is that a form? We didn't dive, you know, our job wasn't.
There was supposed to be another
into
committee that was doing that work,
Right.
and they unfortunately failed to do that work, but it's like so stark that pretty much everything on your list, if we had functional, accountable, transparent, and competent county government or regional government, whatever you want to call it, that they could do all these things and take a lot of the burdens off our small towns and also burdens off our state and have more effective regional services. It's too bad that you didn't actually include that in your recommendations.
It actually, if you look in there, you know, looking at region, it doesn't call out county, it calls out regional governance. So what is regional governance? I mean, that's kind of it's a big topic, right? Like, what does regional governance look like? So that is called out and was brought up, you know, through the surveys and through some of the findings. So I do want to hit on that, but it was called out in terms of looking at regional governance structure. So we still have this group, this steering committee, where we've had a little bit of money left over to keep Rebecca Sanborn Stone and community workshop on board to kind of continue facilitating the discussions. It's not going to last long, you know, we have it for a little while longer. But we are meeting and we're trying to identify, how are we structuring ourselves so that we can best, deliver some of the action items, and the findings, and we have a good amount of things that are from low hanging that we could do without any policy changes or any funding. There's other things in medium or to the high, the longer term categories that are gonna need additional resources, and certainly attention and time, over the course of, years. So we're trying to continue this momentum going, with the steering committee, but obviously we need to build a bigger bench of folks, beyond that committee, that can actually start to, break off and implement, and make some action. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're continuing to meet on a monthly basis. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions now, or if you want to take questions at the end after Denise presents.
Super. I'm gonna have more questions, I think, about the, this table. How we can be, taking some action, which is very exciting, but I would love to, transition to Denise and then maybe we can, unless there's questions, other questions. Right now.
I just add one thing, it's like, these recommendations were not something the steering committee just came up with. These came from the actual data and the information that was gathered to kind of and then look through it all and say what were we actually hearing? And that's where the high level recommendations came in. So if something isn't there, it doesn't mean it's not important. It just maybe wasn't, near the top of the list of recommendations. We certainly can still find that in the deeper report.
Yeah.
And some of the things you might be thinking about.
Well, and I'm looking forward to digesting this more and thinking about, timelines for, how some of these things might be able to get done, but, anyway, but let's, yeah.
I don't have a presentation. I mean, I don't,
It's not there.
I'm low tech, but
Good stuff.
that's okay.
Super. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's nice to see you all. For the record, my name is Denise Smith and I'm the Executive Director at the Vermont Council on Rural Development. I'll explain who we are in just a minute. I want to thank you for inviting us, Senator Watson, and for having us come. I know it's a busy time of year right now for everybody, so I really appreciate you making the time for this. And I'm really excited to kind of follow up on your question. I know a lot of you live in rural areas, so you probably know exactly the kind of town that Gary presented up there. We all have them in our communities, and some of us live in those towns. I'm excited to have the opportunity to present the collective work we've been doing to support investment in rural Vermont towns. I say collective because of all the work that's happened over the last few years with the MTAP program that AOA had for a couple of years. As well as the VERDA work that's been happening for the last year, which was commissioned through Act 181. So my organization, the Vermont Council on Rural Development, has been around for 30 years. We're actually the State Rural Development Council that was created in the Farm Bill in the 90s. After a couple of years, they didn't give us federal money anymore through USDA. So we became a 501c3 in about 1995, 97. Some of you may know us. We are the community visit organization. We go to small towns all over the state. We just did our planning meeting in Brandon, which is the next town we're working in. We've been to Pulte a couple times and have done the work of the community visits around the state. We at this point have been around for 30 years. We've done about 100 communities. So we're halfway there. We have like 2/3 left to go, so maybe a third done. Let's see. We're also an organization that helps to build leadership capacity at the local level. We provide coaching. We started during COVID, the Vermont Community Leadership Network, which offers online trainings, resources, and then we every year put on a leadership summit for community leaders and rural development people. At the same time, we are a state and federal partnership. Is how we describe ourselves. Our board is made up of agency heads. So we have secretaries from different agencies on our board, as well as leaders from community development organizations like VLCT, And we've had VHCB on the board in the past and Preservation Trust. So we are like this partnership of people. So when we go to a community, we don't just go alone, we go with a lot of other folks. Let's see, one other thing, when we work where we're invited as an organization, so the select board actually has to write us a letter and invite us to come. And we have a waiting list, we do about 3 community visits a year. And we have a 2-year wait list for those at this point. So we're pretty like, we talk about overprescribed programs in the state of Vermont, this is for one of them. But today I'm here to talk about the evaluation of rural technical assistance. We were one of the steering committee members, and actually attended all of the meetings, as that report was getting drafted, as the work was happening. And really kudos to the Amos State Commerce and Community Development for getting UVM involved and doing really data informed work, so that it wasn't just their ideas. It validated a lot of what we already know, but it also was really effective, in getting people's voices, Vermonters to the table, to talk about this, to talk about what is happening in communities and where the barriers are, and what types of solutions need to happen. And the summit was a lot of fun, and actually I hosted the table on regional governance. We actually had a big group of people at the summit that started thinking about that, because that was definitely one of the recommendations.
Yeah.
So all the findings from that report really resonate with BCRG and what we know. And we do have a follow-up action that this body could take, surprise.
Does it involve money?
Oh my God. I think it might. Well, money creates capacity helps us support this work. And so after the report came out in November, we quickly moved into action as an organization with our partners. And this is really inclusive of regional planning commissions, regional development corporations, us, VLCT, Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns, Preservation Trust, right? Like it's an inclusive group of people, LIOB, the Land Access and Opportunity Board. And what we're asking for, is how I described it to Representative Brainy. It's like a bridge right now, right? We had this MTAP money that came into the state that we were able to do a lot of great work. We were working together, we were starting to coordinate, we had this VERTA steering committee. So everybody was like coordinating and working together. And what we're asking for right now is a bridge to continue that work, to keep this coalition working, and to provide coordinated services to towns. And then the other thing that it will do, it will help provide some navigation support, which is what towns are asking for. And the reason might not, like, there's a lot, it's a complex system, right? And any complex system needs like people to be able to navigate their way out. But also because towns are volunteer run and, somebody might be there for a little bit and then they switch and then it's a new person. So every time it's like re-educating another person on like what systems and things are out there for them. And so we really see that as kind of like a role that this group of people can serve in. And then the third thing that we'd like to continue to do, because it was so effective, were these flexible grants that we were able to give to communities. AOA, it was just such an easy process. If somebody wanted to hire a grant writer, we could be like, yep, here's some money. Or if they wanted us to do a facilitation, we could pay, we had capacity and staff to be able to go and do that. I use Wyndham as an example. They weren't on our community visit list. It's a 2-year wait for our community visit. Wyndham's a town of 400 people. And they really needed help. And we were able to use our MTAP resources to be able to give them a 2-step, we call it 3 steps, like a dance. But it's, instead of doing the big 3-step process, we went in and had a process to really help them identify some action items that they could take. It was a community, as we're seeing a lot right now, a community who had just closed their school. And we're seeing that a lot. We're getting a lot of requests from towns whose schools are closing to come in and help them. It's a catalyzing moment for a community. And it's an opportunity for us to be helpful, right? In helping them figure out what it is that they want to do next. I'm totally not off script, so I hope I don't get any age from you may, I was gonna pass them around. I think the other thing I'll just say, and I am off script, but as as things and systems get more and more complex, the need to be able to support small towns, is increasing. The other thing that we have been working on is, civic participation, right, is declining, and how do we get our young people more involved in our communities and governance? So that's another like piece of our work, is like, we're always thinking about like, what is it that towns, we listen to what towns are telling us and what they're struggling with, and that's definitely another aspect of it. And so how do we build systems to support them? Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, I know what I want to say. This sounds ambitious, right? This like 1 year, we will come back to you with evidence, we hope. But this is really a continuation of the work that's already been happening. And so that's why we're saying this is like bridge funding, to really, so that we can get or continue to get organized. You know, the MTAP is a 2-year pilot, which really isn't to do some of this, like this coordinating and organizing and navigating work. And so we really want to extend, like we're trying to extend that funding to be able to continue to do that work. And this money would go not just to be CRD, so I want to clear this is also going to go to our other technical assistance providers, but mostly if we get the full 5, would go in small grants to communities. For your knowledge, the House did put us in their budget for $250,000. So in case you're,
So you're in the house for.
yeah, we're in the House for $250,000.
And what was the governor recommend?
Nothing, but last year he recommended 3 million to continue MTAP, and it got taken out of the House. Yeah, that was the MTAP program. It was ARPA money. And so that was, so last year there was a $3 million recommend. This year we all know, you know, his ideology on the budget. And so he did not put anything in, but we did get, the House sees this as a need, and I think they were, you know, they navigated a lot. So the fact that we're in the House budget was good.
Yes, go ahead.
So talk to us about the difference between 250 and 500.
You know, I think the difference between 250, we have not done the budget for 250. When we did the 500, we really thought we could probably use about 300,000 to give to towns. So maybe cut that down less, right? So some of it's staffing, and some of it is in would be in grants. When we provide technical assistance, we consider that like part of the TA request. But we have not run a budget on the 250 yet, because we're hopeful.
So it's helpful for us to understand the difference.
Lauren might have something to say.
Yeah,
You want to
so
introduce yourself?
I'm Lauren Brady. I work for the Vermont Council on Rural Development, supporting their our community visit program
And policy.
and policy work. Our community visit program works with all of your communities, and then we try to support with follow-up technical assistance. But the community visit program itself can't sustain that. So for 250,000, we think would certainly cut the small grants to communities. We could continue a degree of coordination, which has been building up and is sort of gaining traction more and more. We could continue some small grants to communities, but it would severely limit what we're able to pass on, because the coordination work takes a certain amount between the different, there are a dozen or more TA providers who are trying to work together and make sure we're providing customized, specific, coordinated support to communities. I hope that's helpful. Yeah.
Yes.
And so what you did in Wyndham is emblematic of what.
Yes, exactly.
Village.
Yep.
Village.
Yep, exactly. Yep, exactly. Yeah, it just gives us that capacity to provide more technical assistance that we, you know, and I'll just name as we've been around for a while, right? That's other organizations, we're getting a lot, and things are complicated, and volunteers are don't help, you know, they can't do it all. And so we're getting, you know, we're seeing an increase in the number of requests and opportunities that towns really need support with.
I guess I do have a logistics follow-up question. So this money for, you know, 100,000 would be to VRCD, or would it be to MTAP?
So MTAP is gone, so
MTAP's gone.
yeah, I think the House put it in through ACCD.
Okay,
We do get a small grant right now from ACCD to support our community visit program. But this money would go through ACCD, so they would be the
Okay.
receiving agency of it.
Okay.
And then they could subcontract us to do the coordinating navigation and like the facility, which is what we do, right? Like that's what we do as an organization.
Okay.
So,
Senator Wright and then Senator Lewis.
I'm talking out loud here, so this, but
love it.
and
You're not
thank
gonna stop.
yes, I think your connection, your example of Wyndham and your connection, your comment about how you're increasingly helping towns who've had to close their school, is really relevant to the broader conversation that we're having in this building, and I say this with the chair of education sitting here, thinking, you know, the increase in funding, we've heard this in the education conversation of we should be providing some kind of funding to towns who are in a position where they have to close their school or merge their schools and or work with the town next to them to try to figure out a path forward to potentially, you know.
We just met with the district yesterday.
Exactly.
Having that, like, right, how do we do this? What does education look like for us?
Exactly, and I mean, I just think in my district, the towns you've worked with, they're raw with those conversations right now, and whether they're in the future or in their past or right now happening. And I'm wondering, you know, to justify the other 250, if we could make a stronger connection to that idea of you working with towns that are going through those conversations.
I mean, it's not just us, right? VHCD, PTV, like all of our partners are also working in
Yeah.
those towns as well. And sometimes it's us coming in, we just did it in Roxbury, right?
Right.
Where we, it's a great example, because it just happened. We did the community visit soon after. And there was a purchase made by the town of the school right after it closed. And then they created, after our community visit, they identified it as their priority. They created a school committee. And so it was, and from that, right, then we bring the resources. Now they're working with Preservation Trust, and Preservation Trust took us all, them and their select board, the school committee, and on a bus tour to look at what other communities are doing with their school buildings in the middle of their town. And that,
Rochester?
they did go to Rochester, the high school there.
Yeah, they're
that
doing
was- I was there,
yeah.
it was so cool.
And Addison.
Addison.
Yeah, because so there are these towns that have been working for years.
Yeah.
Well, now Ripton is going to be one, and Shoreham potentially. So these towns really need help to try to figure out what to do. And there's a lot of sadness and loss that accompanies it, so just trying to help them see the possibility too. And your process is so great. I mean, I'm familiar with the work you just did, New Haven, and yeah, and they were so excited, like, and wanted to tell me all the things that, you know, so I think that is a need that is gonna be more and more as our communities are having these really hard, really charged conversations, and they need help getting through them. So if there's a process that already works, that's tested, and yours is, I think that could be really helpful.
Yeah, and I'll just name New Haven, we were just at housing is the other one, so
Yeah,
they
yeah.
identified housing and community gathering spaces, so since COVID, like loneliness and has been really a big thing in communities. And some of them have lost their churches, right?
Yeah.
Their third spaces are closing, and so that's another one that's coming up.
I'm getting to Pittsburgh.
That's on our list, yes.
Yeah, we actually, we can have an
I don't
on,
know when that's happened.
okay.
It's on the list of places that BTI would like to work with. There's obviously a process that has to happen, but
Well, and yes, Preservation Trust, we just have some conversations happening right now, so I'll let you know if they're happening
Good.
when we go, yeah. Yeah, Reedsboro is another one. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
If that's what makes the most sense.
I mean,
That's
that's
what,
like,
yeah, that's what we're seeing, yeah.
Senator.
So
Yeah.
can you break down you asked for 500 ton. Can you break that down for how much is for administration, how much, I know you have a lot of volunteer people that work with you and your board. So do you have full-time employees, how many?
Yeah, we're a staff of 8, so we do all this work with a staff of 8, and you're right, we do use a lot of our board and other partners to help us facilitate when we go to communities. So the way that we've broken down the 500,000 would be 30,000 for our staff to help with the navigation services, about 180 for like rural TA. So if we're gonna do a process in Reedsboro, for instance, we would have to pay our staff to do that, or other TA providers that might be providing TA that don't have the flexibility in their budget, so it just provides a little more flexibility. And then the 300,000 is what we're identified for grants to communities, right? So if a community wants to work on something, we would say, here's $20,000, and or you need to do something, and there's no, because a lot of these grants are prescribed for specific things. And so it can be flexible funding that goes to communities.
Do you have a brick and mortar location that require a grant or a key?
Potential, I mean, it could be a match to something, I think it'll depend, I know, Newport's having a lot of conversations right now about what's happening in their downtown. We actually did a community visit with them a few years ago, so they're bringing that community vision to life right now.
Are you asking?
I'm asking where you're physically located.
Oh, I'm at the end of this road. I'm physically located in St. Albans those days, so that's where my kids and my family are, but the organization is right here next to, we rent the small blue house on the corner, that has a little porch in front of it. So we're right in Montpelier.
You count on donations too for?
Donations, foundations, we have an NBRC grant right now, that came into question, a couple months ago, but it's still there. So we have that for another year and a half, we have multiple funders.
Borders Regional.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
We're scrappy, we're like any nonprofit in Vermont where we look for money everywhere.
All right, thank
It's
you.
part of our model. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Okay,
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
for having us.
Okay, super. All right, well, so, we have a little bit of time left. I want to switch to, starting to think about a letter. So I did, this is not pretty yet, but this is like a structure, so it's pretty bare bones right now. It's basically what we talked about today. I was doing this rather late, so I didn't get to look up the amount of money that was in 219 or 223. Senator Hardy, do you remember how much money was in 219?
I think it was 35,000. It was a tiny little amount.
Oh, okay.
I'll look it up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was, I think it was 25 for the department and 10 for.
Oh, wait, for the whoever collaborates.
Yes.
Mhm. Department and in terms of the collaboration, that sounds. Senator Beck, when you.
I'm fine.
Yeah. That sounds right. And then 223, 223, it was a study, I'll have to look up if there was a fiscal note for that. That might have some estimation.
Oh, this was the water,
Yep.
and the first one is salt bill, 218.
Yeah,
Correct.
That's right. Yep, that's salt. Maybe I should put in a little note, like the short name for each of these. 200, yes. Yes, I've got salt in at 200. Oh, I'm sorry, here you go.
So it looks like before the Senate stripped the money, they stripped the money.
Yes.
Before they stripped it, it was 15,000 for general fund to efficiency Vermont for the navigator program. And then we also had 150,000.
That's the original bill.
That's as introduced.
That's
I'm
as
looking at the
introduced.
passed.
You gotta do as passed from our committee, because there was not
Oh, okay.
150,000.
Yeah.
We stripped
Let
it
me go back
down,
to-
I'm
let me go back
pretty
to
sure
calendar.
35K.
Yeah. We'll find the I'll find the calendar.
So I was just also filling in this chart with what the asks were, I'm not, not to say that that's what we're deciding to do. The other thing that I wanna note is, Senator Pritchett has indicated that, for anything that we put on our list, he wants to know the priority order. So, yes, right, so I've listed, the last sentence in this, the blurb at the top says the proposals below are in our priority order. And I didn't wanna make judgment call about this is, yeah, I did put our bills at the top and I listed them in numerical order just to try to be, like neutral. And then I did zero organization of the things below,
So we were 25,000 general fund to DPS
okay,
and 10,000 to the climate economy act, both in the general.
okay.
We're looking for 220.
Yep, 223, and that one might not have an amount of money explicitly listed for 223, so. I think we'd have to get an estimate if there,
Is there a fiscal, there should be a fiscal note for it that would say.
yeah, several hundreds, do you remember if there was, we made a, because I don't think I asked for a fiscal note on 223.
Oh, you got one.
We did, okay, okay, great,
It's all, the only thing in there within the expense is premiums
Yeah.
for
but yeah, for the.
legislative rankings.
So the fiscal note that we got on our version of 3.1, $14,000 for the study
14,
per diem.
Okay. Okay. Okay, that is helpful. 219 was 25,000 for Department of Public Service to extend their study, and then 10,000 for Climate Action Center for collaborating with them, and then what I have at least as the ask for the conservation districts was to match the house 912.
Wait, where are they at?
Oh, sorry, go to the next one down.
Okay.
Yeah,
12.
yeah, 912, which was broken down into 612 base, 300 one time,
Yeah.
and it matches, that would match the house. And then VHCB was 37.6 million from PTT.
Yeah.
And they also had 2.8 million in the capital bill.
Right.
And that also matched the house and the government. I'm not sure.
I think the governor just let the let the property tax flow. I don't
Yeah,
know
right.
what to do with the capital.
I don't know what they did with the capital bill.
I think I remember them saying that it was as recommended, that everything in there was in the governor's budget.
You know,
And then else.
well, it was
One-time funds for
I don't recall what that was for. It was just part of their.
Clean water.
Oh, yes, that's right. It was, yes. it was
Yeah, clean water projects.
Yes. Okay. I am anticipating that we will hear more about the farm security fund actually Tuesday. So putting a pin in that one. Remote rural technical assistance, again, I'm just putting like, what was the ask, right? So 500,000. But this would really be for ACCD for this purpose. And we can hear more about these other. I did add one, I know there's this other bill 740 that's on our wall, which I think we're gonna walk through tomorrow. I think that's what's on the list, but anyway, I know that there's money associated with that, so I just made a note of that.
That the dam safety.
No, so there's, well, we talked about the dam safety bill yesterday.
Where's the inventory bill?
It's this greenhouse gas inventory bill, it's the one that I.
H 740.
Yep, that's H 740. And then the dam safety bill is H 778. Which we have not taken up yet. But we'll do that on Tuesday.
Yes. 7:40, walk through the channel.
Yep. Okay. And I think we might get one other ask about a program that has to do with forestry. So I think the slow camp, yeah. Which
Oh.
next week's, yeah,
Okay.
so, and we did also get an official word from Senator Pershlick that he wants these by, not tomorrow, but next Friday, so.
Good.
So we have a little bit more time to get into it, but I'm glad that we've at least started this process.
Yeah.
Yes, slow campus.
Okay, great, so. Again, should be thinking about what we want to do for priority order. Which makes it even trickier, but there we are. Any thoughts or comments folks want to share at this point? No, it's fine, but. No? Okay. Okay, great. Senator Williams, anything you want to share? Okay. All right, super. Then with that, we will adjourn for the day. Thank you.
Sorry.
You're fine.